You may have seen a bunch of comic book pros have been sharing this information now. I think they did it last year as well, where they have somehow been able to spin how either bad the industry is in terms of a spot, comic book industry, American comic book industry, or they're spinning like how good it's or lack. Let's say this, the stagnation. So Comichron, who we've covered here, they compile a lot of data, a lot of numbers, and they of course published this and said that basically this was the most successful year this past year ever. Now you hear that and you're like, there's no way. I've seen too many books on the shelves. I've seen too much, there's too much dog crap that I refuse to buy. There's nobody's buying these books. You've seen comic stores close down over the last years, especially during the summer of well, it was summer love, but it wasn't because of the summer love. It was more like because of the stupid government COVID restrictions and stuff. So you look at that and you're like, there's no way that makes sense, okay? But when you look at the data in more detail, it makes a lot more sense as to why this exists. So this says that last year, 2021 topped any year in comics history inflation adjusted dollars. While early 1950s unit sales data were higher, it was all magazines. At the time, 2021's comics formats have a wider range of price points. Now you hear that, and you're like, wait a minute. How on earth is that the case? How on earth are they going to be able to spend that to say that there is some sort of success? Well, if you look at the actual report, you get some more insight on what's happening, okay? And you will see, if you look at this data, and I'm going to show you here in a little bit if I can find that graph that I'm looking at. Here it is. This is the one I want to make sure that you take into consideration. So, yes, if you look at this graph alone, you're like, okay, 2021 outdid every year prior to it, even in the last 5 years. You have even some woke weirdos and these comic pros are spinning this, though they broke themselves. They're like, oh, wow, this just shows that there's no such thing as get woke, go broke. But keep in mind of a couple of things. One, this is not units sold, okay? Remember that. This is not units sold, okay? This is, how do I explain this? The amount of money or revenue that they're claiming that was brought in based upon their data. It's not units sold. It's not how many comics are being bought. It is the money that is circulating around the industry. That's first. But the biggest part of this is you see this bar. I'm sorry for you guys that can't really, I'm going to move it over just a little bit here and go right here. Okay, so as you guys see right here, as I move it over, you can see that 2021, you see graphic novels have eclipsed 1.5 billion. It is never done that. It has never eclipsed a billion, let alone almost 1.5 billion. I'm going to explain why that's the case here in a little bit. But I want you to look at the actual comic book sales. Some people will say, well, it's up. No, it's not. If you look at it from maybe last year during the pandemic year, yeah. But if you look at actual comic sales versus 2016, they're almost identical. It's a little more, but again, that's not units sold. It's a little more, but it's not that significant, as you can see right here. It's not that significant in terms of comics that have been sold, okay? So what is this graphic novel and why on earth have they all, is this big explosion? And why is that what's showing why it's made so much money or made more? Well, they do further explain that here. Our annual reminder. While some manga used to get reformatted in comics magazines for the U.S. market, modern manga are almost exclusively books with spines. Hence, manga are classed as graphic novels, not comic books. And they said, though, which, again, the data doesn't really show that, graphic novels were way up in 2021. So were comic books. No, they weren't. Way up maybe in comparison to the previous year, but not in comparison to even 5 years ago. You look at it, it's almost identical to where it was. So it broke even, which is signifying that there's no growth when you consider that there has been growth in one element that seems to embody all of the comic book graphic novels. So there you go. And you see this number, it's the graphic novels. When someone says, oh, there's been over $2 billion in sales, worth of sales in 2021. Well over half of that is in graphic novels, not comic books. And we know, as they have documented, that graphic novels are being classified, or mangas are being classified as, and I'm not going to say that Comic-Con themselves are being disingenuous here. I'm not willing to say that. What I am willing to say is that, because they do mention that. So you have to be at least fair to them that they do say, okay, well, this is the case. Now I'm looking at it. There was something else here, if I can find it, where they talk about manga and what it is and what it is that it means. Where was that? It says graphic novels after late 2000s, manga and magazine mostly went away. That's why comic books category sales growth in 2021 can be said to be wholly unrelated to manga. So they're saying the slight growth, and again, it's a growth from the previous year, not really from like overall or anything. It's not massive growth. If there is a part that they're being disingenuous about, that's the part. Because again, when you see the numbers in comparison, the number is almost the same as far as if you go look at this here to what it was in 2016. There's not been that massive of a growth. Most of the growth, and it says that mangas grew, and I think the term they use is unprecedented. It was unprecedented how much manga sold in 2021. Well, that's I'm not saying all graphic novels are mangas, but a significant portion of them are. Now, the unit data, which I think is very important, has not been out yet. They usually, and they say that not too far, I believe somewhere in here, they do document that not too long, and I'll keep up with that when we get that data in the upcoming months. I'll be sure to cover that as far as the unit sales, which I think is more important, if not more important than how many units or how much money were made. And I want to see how much of those units are mangas of the graphic novels versus, let's say, the American comic books. That's really when the story is going to be told. These guys are going to try. It's not Comic-Con themselves. I'm not talking about them, the guys that compile the data. I'm talking about the interpretation of the data. It's something that you have to watch out for, because the interpretation of the data has weirdos thinking that, well, American comic books are in a great position, but they're taking into consideration that included in those like graphic novel sales and in those sales that they're mentioning are mangas, and that's being very disingenuous if you do that. So when we get those unit sales, because we don't have those, when we get those unit sales, I'll cover them, and we'll see what those price points are. It's going to be different considering that there was a change with the Diamond and the comic book companies, or rather with the big two. We'll see what happens out of that. But keep that in mind, that there's some fucking up and muddying up with the numbers. We'll see. You just listened to a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake, which is live throughout the week at 12 p.m. Central on YouTube.com/YoungRipper59 and Odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. Be sure to check out my website, EricDJuly.com, so you can stay up to date with everything it is that I'm doing. You can also become a member and get access to a bunch of cool perks and exclusive content, which includes a social media hub where you can interact with myself and other members. It even has an app that you can get, which is now live in the Google and Apple stores.